Okay. 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 Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll stand at ease for a second here. There was another meeting going on in the Capitol, so we'll wait on some folks. I left a short bit early to get here. We'll give them a few minutes. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead and ask everybody to settle down and we'll start this meeting. We've got some folks with us online as well. This afternoon, we have a single item on the agenda, and then I'll sound some things at the completion. Well, I'll actually do that now. It'll give time for people to get here before we start the presentation. I want to note for everyone's I want to call everyone's attention, the committee members, to HB1 that's in our packet. We talked about that last week in our virtual meeting. We will look to have that next week. So I want to encourage members, you feel free to take that with you out of your packet. As we stand today, the only difference in that bill and the bill that was passed this committee in 2021 was the date. Effective date needed to be changed, and that date was changed. You have in your packet some information that was sent by a group that wasn't aware that we were going to take testimony last week, so they wanted to provide that written testimony. So I provide that for your information. We have several bills that have been introduced that are awaiting a fiscal note and the author's request to move forward. So we'll have those, in upcoming months. Today, as an introduction to what we have gotten. I'm sorry, I'm getting a note from our secretary here. We have got today an opportunity to have presented to us for more detailed information about the Student Access Loan Program. And I want to welcome to the meeting today 5 individuals that are going to help us with that presentation. You can all stand and, if you'd like, or wave. Leslie McGuire, the director of the Performance Audit Division with our Georgia Department of Audits. Lisa Kiefer, the deputy director. Emily Dennis, a manager, and she'll be they have you listed as the star of the show this afternoon, Emily. So thank you for being here. Shanika Pereira is an analyst, is on row 2 there. If we need, we'll get Emily some help with that. And Jonathan Wilson is here. And I don't see Mr. Auditor. I don't see Mr. Griffin. No, that's fine. I just wanted to recognize the state auditor if he was here. But we have them. They have. We sent you a highlight of the audit. You should have received an audit over the interim, as we do from the department on multiple things, and we can make a note of where you can get the entire audit online. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Dennis. Let me stop for a second and introduce. I don't remember if Ms. Henderson, were you with us online in our last meeting? If so, I apologize for not introducing you at that time, but Ms. Christy Henderson will be supporting our committee out of the Legislative Council office this year. So welcome aboard and thank you. So with that, Ms. Dennis, I'm going to turn it over to you for the presentation of the audit and any comments you all may have relative to that, after which we'll take questions.
And Martin for the opportunity to discuss our performance audit. Oh, let's see. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Pull it towards me. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss our performance audit on the Student Access Loan Program. I believe you have a copy of the report and the 1-page summary in your packet. If not, as Chairman Martin said, we'll be able to get that for you. I also want to recognize GSFA for their cooperation during the audit. They were extremely helpful in providing us the information that we needed to put the report together. Just to give some background on the Student Access Loan Program, SAL was established in 2012 as a need-based low-interest loan to assist with the cost of higher education. It's administered by the Georgia Student Finance Authority through regulations. This program is not codified in statute. SAL is available to post-secondary students, so both public and private 4-year students, as well as technical college students. Anyone who has demonstrated a need based on their cost of attendance, estimated family contribution, and aid such as federal and state scholarships and grants, as well as federal loans for 4-year students. This basically makes SAL a loan of last resort. 4-year students can borrow up to $8,000 per year, while technical college students can borrow up to $3,000 a year. On average, 4-year students borrow about $5,700 each year, while technical college students borrow about $2,200. SAL has a 1% interest rate unless the individual defaults on their loan. At that time, that increases to 5%. A borrower is considered to be in default if they haven't made a payment after 300 days. On average, a borrower owes about $7,600 when they enter payout status. Currently, regardless of what a borrower owes, their minimum monthly payment is $50 once they enter into repayment. And the maximum time to pay off the loans is 15 years. GSFC receives a $26 million appropriation each year for loans. Borrowers' principal repayments also increase the funds available to distribute out for loans. And interest payments and their origination fees go to support SAL's administrative costs, which average about $3 million per year. They also cover the expenses of other programs within GSFA that do not receive a state appropriation for administration. Since its inception in 2012, approximately $266 million has been loaned out to nearly 36,000 borrowers. Georgia's approach for need-based aid is unique among states. Georgia is one of 7 states that provides loans to undergraduate students. Most states provide need-based aid solely through grants or scholarships. Additionally, most of the other states with loans also have need-based grants and scholarship programs, which typically have a higher state investment. By contrast, Georgia's need-based scholarships, the REACH program, is significantly smaller than SAL. They receive about $5 million in state funds, whereas SAL, as I mentioned, receives $26 million. Through HOPE and Zell programs, Georgia awards more grant dollars per undergraduate student than any other state. However, compared to other Southeastern states, it devotes a smaller proportion of its state assistance to need-based aid. So we devote about 4% of our state funds to need-based aid versus other contiguous states that give at least 17%. For example, South Carolina and Tennessee are also among the top 5 states in the amount of grant dollars they provide per FTE, but these states have diversified the aid that they provide. The nature of a need-based loan program requires GSFA to identify people who need assistance in the short term, but are also able to repay the loan in the long term. These characteristics often don't intersect, and so we've always thought about it as kind of there's 2 sides of the coin here. So the first side of the coin, when you look at assisting borrowers in need, SAL was established as a loan of last resort, which means that after scholarships and federal loans and their family's estimated contribution, the student is still unable to pay for their costs of attendance. Additionally, SAL does not require applicants to submit to a credit check or include a cosigner, and its interest rate of 1% is significantly lower than what someone would receive in the private sector. The availability of funds, both through state appropriation and borrower principal repayments, means that GSFA has been able to distribute loans to all qualified students who apply. So there has not been a need to create any additional criteria to focus limited resources. SAL's design increases access among those most likely to have limited resources. On average, approximately 75% of loan recipients are also eligible for the federal Pell Grant. And in fiscal year 2021, approximately half of the loans distributed went to USG students. About 40% went to students at private nonprofit schools, and about 12% of loans went to technical college students. Our analysis of program outcomes shows the loan is beneficial. About 85% of borrowers persist to the next academic year, but a smaller percent obtain an award. That's about 52%. When we compared outcomes with applicants who did not receive the loan, the largest difference was among technical college students. So for example, approximately 60% of borrowers obtained an award compared to 44% of those who applied for the loan but didn't receive it that same year. And people might not receive the loan for a variety of reasons. Sometimes the schools don't certify their need. Other times they just don't perform the administrative tasks necessary to get the loan. Borrowers at USG and private nonprofit institutions also had higher incomes, but the difference was not as significant. SAL has 2 borrower relief programs that cancel all or a portion of a borrower's debt obligation. So there's a service cancellation allowed to those who graduate from 4-year institutions with a bachelor's or an associate's degree. That provides a year-for-year cancellation for every year of full-time public service that the borrower does. And then there's a loan discharge program that eliminates the full loan obligation for technical college graduates who finish with at least a 3.5 GPA, and that gets rid of their entire loan obligation. However, due to limited eligibility criteria, few borrowers have actually benefited from these programs. SAL also has temporary relief programs that allow borrowers to delay their monthly payments. So for example, borrowers can defer repayments if they demonstrate economic hardship or unemployment, or if they return to school or are on active military duty. Borrowers can also obtain a forbearance for similar reasons or for prolonged illness. So that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is, as a loan program, SAL does require borrowers to repay the funds that they received. So borrowers begin repayments after they leave school, either by graduating or dropping out. The consequences are imposed if the borrower defaults, including damaged credit history, an increased debt obligation because of the increase to the 5% interest rate, and the borrower is sent to a collections agency. On average, about a third of SAL borrowers default within the first 3 years of repayments. This is 3 times higher than federal borrowers, which average more about 10%. There are a variety of reasons for a lack of repayment, but some relate to borrowers' economic situation. We found that Pell Grant eligible borrowers are less likely to repay their loans. Also, those who drop out are more likely to default, and income is lower among defaulted borrowers than those who were able to maintain their good standing during the same 3-year period. One of the effects of the default rate is that SAL will continue to rely on state appropriations to meet loan demands. As I mentioned earlier, borrowers' principal repayments are used to supplement the loan demand. So for example, in fiscal year 2021, GSFA distributed about 28 million in loans, which is obviously 2 million higher than the state appropriation. However, SAL still relies heavily on the lottery funds to meet loan demand, primarily because repayments are lower than what they could or should be. So for example, in fiscal year 2021, if all borrowers who were in repayment were repaying their required loan amount, GSFA could have collected about $18 million, which is about 65% of loan demand. However, it only collected about 7 million, which equates to about 25% of loan demand. We recommend various changes to the program's procedures to both assist borrowers and help ensure repayments. A full table of recommendations can be found in the report in Appendix A. Some action requires more formalized intent, and for that reason, we recommend the General Assembly define SAL's goals and priorities, either in statute or in guidance to GSFA, as well as communicate the extent to which it intends to continue to use lottery funds to help promote loans through SAL. The reason that this is important is that program design will be impacted by what is determined to be the goals and priorities. So for example, if you have an increased focus on ensuring repayments, that might mean changing borrower criteria to require co-signers or credit checks. However, an increased focus on identifying those most in need would require additional accommodations during the repayment period. Likewise, if there was an increased focus on assisting borrowers, GSFA could expand its eligibility for the loan discharge and service cancellation programs that I mentioned. But what this would mean is that SAL would not generate as much cash flow, which means it would continue to rely on state appropriation to meet loan demand. In its response, GSFA indicated interest in seeking guidance from the General Assembly. However, there are recommendations in the report that the agency has the discretion to act on now. So for example, GSFA could reduce the minimum monthly payment required. Currently, this is $50, which is higher than the amortized payments that most borrowers would have based on how much they owe, particularly technical college borrowers. GSFA could also implement payment plans that consider borrowers' ability to pay, similar to what the federal government does. and they could encourage the use of automatic payment plans. Currently, only about 12% of borrowers use that option. That concludes my presentation. Thank you again for the opportunity to present on this topic, and I am happy to answer any questions you might have about our report.
Thank you, Ms. Dennis. You do have a couple of questions. I'll first go to Chairman Perkle. Is that you, number 12 down there?
Yes, sir, it is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. So there was I don't know how the chairman's going to indulge me, if he will, at all, because as you went along, there was a couple of points I was trying to jot down, and so at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned something about Georgia's #1 and the amount of whatever, and it's not so good at something else, and I couldn't jot them down quick enough.
Sure. Georgia provides more undergraduate aid per FTE than any other state.
Would you say that one more time?
Georgia awards more grant dollars per FTE than any other state.
Okay,
That is.
that's what I thought you said.
And that is primarily through the Hope and Zell Miller programs. But when we look at contiguous states, what we see is that the amount of state investment is more diversified in other states. So they provide more funding related to need-based aid, as well as merit-based scholarships. And so Georgia's proportion dedicated to need-based aid is significantly lower than that of other states.
Okay, a follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Thank you. I used to be a banker, and I got to tell you, 30% default rate, and I've been a former banker a lot quicker than what I was. You mentioned two ways that other than paying off your student loan debt, that you can discharge the debt. And one is public service. And the second one being, I wrote down 3.5 GPA, but I don't know that I wrote that down correctly. What was the deal with that? So just do good in school.
That's actually only available to technical college students. Four-year students do not have the opportunity to do the loan discharge. But
So
that is
all of the
available.
loan discharge, so public service would not help with USG.
The public service would. These are two separate programs.
Okay.
The public service service cancellation program is offered to those who obtain a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree. And what that means is that if you get a loan all 4 years of school, then you can be in public service for 4 years.
What does that mean?
So you can be in state and local government, teachers.
Like here?
Mhm.
Okay.
Teachers qualify as well. Those are the primary areas. But each year of full-time consecutive service will give you 1 year of the loan will be canceled, the balance of 1 year of the loan, because you're supposed to be paying as you go as well. So that's available for bachelor's and associate's degree completers. Those who graduate from technical colleges have the opportunity to discharge their loan upon graduation with a 3.5 GPA.
There are a couple more questions. If I guess I can, since I have the floor. It is not the chair's wish to vilify the loan, vilify the people that aren't paying it, certainly vilify President Riley and student finance who's administering this, but it is instead to bring this to the committee for questions, just like the gentleman, chairman answered, is we're not getting a payback on 33%. I mean, it, quite frankly, and again, I don't mean to say this to put a finger on student finance, but I mean, it's a lot of administrative burden for a very small program. I see President Riley nodding her head. I mean, that again, she's doing, that group, you just moved over there. This program was in your area before you came. So the question, the reason I bring this audit is just to spread this information across this committee. We get it across our desk when it's provided to us, but to spread it, across you today, to put it in front and to, it begs the question, is there a better way to deploy this capital to help people cross the finish line. Persistence, because isn't true. In your presentation, you also said 85% of the people get to the next year, but only 52% get an award. And clearly this is working for some students. Somewhere up here, 36,000 borrowers, 266 million. I mean, somewhere it's working, but I wonder if someplace it's not. We're handing, a gallon of water to a drowning person, right? So that's the reason, we're here to make note of this, and perhaps there's a way to improve portions of this or redeploy that. So we'll move on with questions. I'm going to go with Chairman Carpenter online. Chairman Casey Carpenter.
Thank you. Thank you there, Chairman. I appreciate you. So this is probably more of a conversation than a question, but just do we happen to have the success of the HOPE program? What's the graduation rate on people that receive HOPE? Does anybody have that information?
I will defer to GSFA if they have that information.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, not readily available, but we're happy to provide it for you.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'd just like to, let's if we're going to examine it, I think it'd be wise to put it side by side with HOPE and see how kids on this program, what their graduation rates are versus HOPE. And then I think the other piece, I think your suggestion of another co-signer is probably a good thing, and maybe even tying it into issuing it to kids that did not receive the Pell Grant, because it sounds like there's a linkage there of that Pell Grant. People receiving that money are not as likely to pay back money. I don't know. That's just a food for thought. But I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Chairman. Number 29, is that you, Chairman Knight? Chair, is that you? Yes, sir. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, to the Department of Audits and Accounts and your state auditor, Greg Griffin, thank y'all. I have a special affinity for audits and numbers and the detail dive that y'all do. Yeah, I know. But what you do is important. And I think also the policy questions that you arrive at or pose here are really great policy decisions as to the direction of the program. That being said, I have 3 questions. One is, could you get me the list of I know you mentioned some, but the list of the public service positions that qualify for discharge of debt? That would be one.
Sure. So just looking into the report information, so it's for every year of consecutive service as a public school teacher or a public service employee. And so that would include employees of the state of Georgia, executive, legislative, and judicial branches, University System of Georgia, local boards of education, and local government.
All right, thank you. Second thing is I think it's worth noting that, the purpose of this is usually is stated as a loan of last resort. In other words, people who are, whether through, HOPE, other grants, other loans, and this is a last resort, sort of to make sure that they cross the finish line. Is that right?
It is a loan of last
Okay.
resort. Mhm.
So I want to point to, and this will lead me to my question, and it may be more of a question for my former colleague as far as data. But did you examine or look for any correlations of the default rates? In other words, if you look at your exhibit number 6, you see that USG default rate has gone up from, what was it, 15 to 18? I think 15 to 18. TSG is going down. And I think there's a little less, TSG is students are probably availing themselves a little bit less of this than others.
That's correct.
The private, nonprofit, and the private for-profit are all going up. So did we look at any underlying data or correlation for this? And the reason I say is that's my department, is the appropriation side of this. And I'm guessing, I am asking, did we look at maybe reasons why from actual student data? In other words, we see, and typically, the default rates are going up, USG, private both nonprofit and for-profit. Did we see any correlation there as to the students' types of degrees? In other words, the return on investment. So if the USG nonprofit, or I mean, the private nonprofit and for-profit, what is the product? Because if we get kids through, not kids, young adults through, did they come out with a degree that would allow them and give them the financial resources to repay the debt? And that is my question. And it's a yes or no question to the Department of Audits. Did you go down that rabbit hole, if you will, to look at any of that information?
We did not look at specific majors and degrees for which people completed. We did look at various characteristics like the institution type. When we looked at whether or not people were more likely to default, we looked at things like institution type. We looked at whether or not the borrower who had actually obtained an award and found that those that obviously dropped out of school, this is not unexpected, but they were more likely to default than those who had obtained an award. We also were able to look at some income level data and found that those that defaulted made about 40% less than those that were in good standing. But we didn't get to the level of detail in looking at specific majors.
Okay. Because this is fascinating, because, you know, if a lot of this was designed and there's a discharge provision that allows for, you know, public service teachers, you know, state workers, those are degrees that are quite frankly, you know, 4-year degrees. And I know coming out, you know, there's pretty good income levels that go with it. So with what you've said, I would be interested in whatever level of data that you did obtain as far as types of institutions. But I may want to follow up with my former colleague as to more of a detailed. And here's where I'm going with this. No matter, you know, we're sitting here doing policy, but if we're putting taxpayer dollars, no matter how we're doing it, whether it's in a loan or it's a, you know, merit-based or a needs-based, if no matter what it is, if we're appropriating dollars, are the degrees that these people are striving to obtain, are they a good return on investment for them? In other words, are there certain areas or characteristics that we can see and say, hey, a lot of this is going into certain areas that are not letting these students come out with an opportunity to make a decent living and support themselves? That's where I'm going. So, you know, to my former colleague, I may want to pull some data, if you don't mind. And Chairman, I appreciate your indulgence with this, but I think that's an important piece of the puzzle before we start deciding exactly what policy or not. If we're going to appropriate dollars, period, we want to make sure that we've got good key performance indicators, making sure that we've got a good product for these young folks to come out and make a really have a successful life and make a meaningful career that they can support themselves and repay these loans. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll follow up with that. And President Riley, if you'll go to the mic over there, I'm going to let you answer, either validate or invalidate the statement I'm about to make. I don't believe the current criteria for the loan has anything to do with the degree one is seeking. Is that not true? Podium mic on. That's not a criteria, is it, at this point?
You are correct, Mr. Chairman. That is not a criteria.
And that to go, Chairman, that was to some extent what I was saying, or the statement I was making. In many cases, we continue to, you know, we pour water on I don't know, it's a bad analogy, but I was using the thing of helping people across the English Channel. If you're swimming, it doesn't matter if you swim all the way across and you drown 100 yards from the shore. It doesn't matter. And what we're doing is we're pulling them back from the shore instead of pushing them forward. So that's what we're kind of talking about. That said, there's going to be a thought process that it's not up to us to guide a student to not pursue the dream they have, the degree they wish, but it is up to us, I think, to help them be more eyes wide open as to what they're doing. I mean, I can't, and the financial laws don't let you go and buy a house you can't afford to pay back based on your income. Yet we let people borrow money under this program without a credit check, without any safety netting under, do you have any ability to pay it back? And the last thing I would say, we'll go to the next question, is remember, only 52% of the people that are getting some portion of loan here, with the average loan being $7,600, only 52% of them are getting, the lady referred to it as an award. This is not necessarily a degree. It could be just a certificate from a tech school. So only 52% of the people, that means 48% are not getting anything. So again, we talk about in here, sometimes the only worst thing, I guess, than when you start college and don't finish, or start a degree program and don't finish, the only thing that makes that worse is you have debt from this left over. I mean, think about that. So that's the reason we're kind of talking about this today, and looking at perhaps how we can redeploy or right size that. We had some more questions. Representative Metz, is that you down there, number 15?
Can you hear me? Do I have it on? Oh, Lynn, how are you? Good seeing you. First of all, well, I'll make my remarks. They will be brief. Want to thank the Georgia Department of Audits and Accounts. I'm still going through this document. I haven't completed it yet. And the reason I picked it up is because I shared with the chair an email, Lynn, that I received from one of my constituents in House District 55. And since that time, I've received other questions from my constituents. So with that being said, I would love to have the opportunity to get with you or someone from your department. So when I go, as a matter of fact, I think we're having a town hall meeting soon. And I want to make sure that I have accurate, correct information, because there's a lot of interest, a lot of questions. And hopefully I'll get a chance to get with you and some of the members of your department, so we can go over it. I can't hear.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh.
Thank you, Representative Metz. We appreciate the opportunity to provide education to your constituents. Many confuse the state of Georgia's student access loan program with federal student loans. And the repayment terms and forgiveness and some of the other provisions are quite different for federal loans as compared to these loans we're speaking of today. And we're happy to be available to you and your constituents to provide that guidance and make sure that they understand obligations that they may have entered into, depending on who the lender might have been. My pleasure.
Representative Varnell, can you hear me? You're with us virtually.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do agree with both of the chairmen when you were talking about the types of degrees, and also being a retired educator and also a person who has a student loan that I got when I was working on my specialist. And the one thing, even with educators, you have to work and pay, as she was saying, and you have to work a certain amount of years in order to be absolved of that loan. And there are degrees, my husband refers to them as door stoppers, like psychology, sociology, and people get degrees in that, and then they don't want to go back and get their master's because they have to have a master's to get a job. So I do agree that we should look at the jobs, and Georgia State has done an excellent job of making sure that the people that graduate, their students that graduate, that they graduate on time, and also that they're in a field where they can get a job. And I think that we should look at their model as we go forward in making decisions about the loan, and to make sure that when students graduate, that they are in a field where they can immediately go out and start working. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Look, we have another question, but let me clarify something. When you say the public service a year for year, so I get out, I have this loan, I teach school for a year, okay, or you can do whatever. Does that just alleviate a year of payment? So, I mean, I did it real quick here. If I owed you $7,600 and I'd amortize it over 15 years, that's $45 a month. So I know it has to be 50. So so does that relieve me of $600?
It relieves you of, so each year that you're in school.
Okay, that's
if
what
you get
that's
a
the
loan,
year I
yeah,
was,
yeah.
that's what I was trying to get to. So if I took out $2,500 that year, but what if I took out 3,500 next year? Do I get the higher year first? Is it first in, first out? Well, I mean, those things are just questions. So
Yeah,
so it begs, I'm sorry, but you know, and your next representative, but it begs the question here is if look, it's a lot of money. $26 million state appropriation. I don't want to say that, you know, I mean, even we have billions of money. This is a lot of money. But if we're trying to deploy this, I mean, having something that makes it a little bit easier for folks to get their hands around. I got to think there's some people that wish they could pay back or would try to pay back, and we don't give you the flexibility, President Riley, to allow them to do it. Some people won't. I mean, there's going to be people that can't want bad actors, but it would seem to me that we have some areas to work on. You guys have done a tremendous job, and in talking with them the other day, I kept talking about counting numbers, and they were good at that. The one thing that I need to recognize, and Chairman Knight's left, is this is not just number counting. This is, you know, what I used to call process re-engineering. This is looking at the overall process. So there's numbers in this audit report, but there's also doing things better, faster, stronger in this audit report that we could do. So I appreciate you guys doing that. I appreciate the questions and the feedback from Representative Jackson.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that when I heard this report, what you were saying today, I said, oh my God, some of the things that I think are missing is that are the students being told, I don't know why my phone wanted to do that. Are they being told what the regulations are? What happened if they go into default? And the reason I asked that question, I used to work in financial aid at Savannah State University. And one of the things that I found is that students will not listen when you are doing it. But then I also understand that there is a need for the counselors to be educated, because when the kids comes time for graduation, they don't look at how much money they're out there and having to pay back. So therefore, they're going to go into default. And a 1% interest, you know, they need to know that. They need to know the importance of that. And my suggestion is that maybe you have a session with the counselors that are in financial aid across the university system. You may have had that. But when I look and I see 15 years to pay back loans, and our kids go into default, then the interest rate go from 1% to 5%. That's when they get in problems. That's when they have problems, because when they get out of school, all they see about is getting a car, you know, getting those things that they think are the necessities, and not realizing that they're going to have the federal loan and the state loan, because it's the state. And which one do they pay? Then there is no obligation, I can tell you. So they're in debt for life. But I would like to see from you the percentage of students by colleges and universities, if that is possible, Mr. Chairman, to see how much money do we have outstanding that is not being paid as a result of your audit. And Mr. Chairman, I don't know if that's possible or not, but I would like to see it. I was reading this document. We printed it out, and if you will afford me an opportunity to read it in its entirety, then I probably will have more questions for you as well as from the people that are here today.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And let me say this: this was intended to be a beginning of a conversation, not at all an ending. I know many times we go to national conventions and you hear something and you hear it and you kind of get all worked up about it, and then nothing happens. This is not what we intend to do here. We intend to look for a solution. Help me out here. I don't remember exactly, but if a repayment experience rises to 30% at an institution, is that right? Do I have that number? Then that institution no longer can offer, President Riley? to help me out with those numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a compliance review procedure of 3 years of experience in default for institutions. If the default rate for the cohorts enrolled at an institution exceeds 30% in the first year, there's a remediation year. If it continues in the second year, there's additional remediation opportunities. After the third year, that institution will be disqualified from issuing further student loans.
Thank you. And I wanted to sound that out because, that again, not to put it on an institution, this screen is not about blaming anybody for this process, but there could be some students at that particular institution, where it be TCSG or university system component, that are the best candidates to do this, but they're somewhat eliminated. So we just have some artificial things to look at. And so we're going to, take it in, and we're on day 10. We have some work to do, but we're going to try to bring back something that we can consider to act on the audit, the folks' recommendations, and maybe even beyond. So we're going to try to make it better. Are there further questions online or in person? I don't see any further questions. I want to thank you guys again for coming. I feel like you guys were all dressed up on the front row and you didn't get to say anything. You just reinforced it. So we appreciate you. We tell the auditor, Mr. Griffin, we thank you for what you do. And I think this should serve for those of us that are on other committees, that we a lot of times get these audits from the state auditor, and you get a lot of them. And many times you look at them and they're 60 pages or 50 pages or 40 pages, and you tend to put them over there. This is a perfect example. If you're on a committee and the audit deals with you, please take a moment to look at it. And there's something good. We did. I talked ourselves into one more question. Representative Bernal.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this question isn't related to the audit. I wanted to know if we were taking any consideration in for our HBCUs that have had the bombs on their bombs on their campus. Have we talked to the board of regents or anybody about the security of those students?
Yes, ma'am. I would do that. I was actually in contact as it was ongoing yesterday while we were on the floor with the regents. They kept me in contact, and I would tell the committee here in consultation. I kept the speaker up to date, and given the situation, I know that there was and I see there's people from the region. So if I'm misspeaking, tell me, but the communication came from them that you had federal authorities, you had state authorities, you had the university component authorities, all focused. I think yesterday was Fort Valley. Am I correct? And so I did not raise it on the floor. I was up to date on it and knew from my discussions with the regents that all good authority for the safety of the students, faculty, and other individuals was being taken care of. And I made this decision in consultation with the rooms not to raise it on the floor, so as not to raise the issue of certainly it's serious and it was taken serious, but I think in many cases, it's like the person that runs on the football field that just wants to be on TV and disrupt things. We didn't want to raise the issue of somebody that had just made that threat. We didn't want to exacerbate it. So yes, ma'am, and we can at the next meeting, we can ask them to give us a brief discussion and consultation with the HBCUs, if they have any feedback, positive, negative, or otherwise. But we were informed, literally by the minute yesterday what was going on those campuses. And first and foremost, we wanted to make sure that the individuals on the campus were taken care of.
Thank you.
Secretary of the committee, Patty Bentley. Representative Bentley.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me well?
Yes, Patty.
I just want to thank Representative Bernal for bringing forth that concern. And I yesterday had a chance to speak immediately to President Jones at Fort Valley State University, and he shared with me the action that they were taking, working with agencies, law enforcement agencies, to address the issue. And they were taking it very serious. And at that time, everything was good. And later over in the evening, I got a message from him that all was clear. But yes, I appreciate the thought of and concern about what's taking place throughout this country for historically Black colleges and universities. So I hope and pray that everything comes to a close pretty soon and we can figure out what's going on and why is this all taking place. But I just wanted to just thank again for bringing forth that consideration.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And then let me just say again, because in this world we live in, people parse words. I don't want anybody to walk out of this room with me, saying I somehow equated those threats on those campuses to somebody running on a football field. I want to be absolutely clear that somebody doesn't soundbite me on that. My point was the sick people that do that type of thing, we did not want to give them any press. So I just want to be 100% clear that, I didn't mean to equate the danger or anything like that. It's just, we are glad it appeared to be an absolute hoax, but when it happens, when and if it happens again, the authorities will take it absolutely seriously, but we will not give them any notoriety from it. Instead, we will focus on the safety of those folks on campus.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am. We lean on our presidents and our law enforcement officials to do that. So, I appreciate this. I'm going to, Nurse Bentley, if you're complete, I'm going to wind up the committee meeting and move toward adjournment with this statement. I appreciate this group. I appreciate this committee. The last 3 years that going into the fourth one to get to work with you all. It's my honor to do it. We don't agree on everything. We have multiple sides of the aisle here. We do, but this group has worked together, and we have a great opportunity with just what we talked about today and some other things that we have coming. As I mentioned before, we're in. Everybody down here, that work that happens on this hill affects people, but we have the opportunity to affect people that affect people. So we can multiply our efforts and working together with you all is my distinct pleasure and honor. So with that, I thank everybody for coming. I want to, ask our members, some online, we're going to move next week toward, more of an in-person meeting and less virtual. So if you're able, I'd like everybody to be in the room. We're going to start hearing legislation, and I think that's better done in person if we're healthy and can do that. So I'm going to encourage everybody to do that. With that, if there's nothing further before the committee will stand adjourned without objection. See no objection, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you to the state auditors.